I'm especially excited today to be joined again by Dessa. Welcome back to the City, Dessa.
Thanks.
Today we're going to be focusing almost exclusively on your book, My Own Devices, which comes out this week, but we'll be occasionally looking at it through the lens of some songs on the most recent record, Chime. In Up on Two Wheels, which is the opening chapter of the book, you referred to the moment where you announced your first real-life goal. You do so from the throne of your mother's chair. Can you remember what it is?
I do, yeah. I told her that I wanted to have a conversation, and then I proceeded to explain what a conversation was. I said I wanted to do the thing where you talk, and then I talk, and then you talk again, and I talk. But it's always about the same thing.
Always about the same thing, yeah. So that's what we're going to do for about an hour now. We're going to talk about three things, basically. True stories from the road on number 1, music, 2, science, and number 3, senseless love. Many of your most meaningful interactions have happened in cars.
Yeah.
As I highlight that, does any particular car-based meaningful interaction come to mind?
I mean, I think there's something about the confined space of a car, and maybe also the fact that you're relieved from eye contact. So it's
because you're both facing forward.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we're both facing this way, I think sometimes intimate things can be more easily discussed.
So discussion, conversation, talking about one thing is sometimes what happens in a car. Your first experience of rapping is also something that happens in a particular car.
Right.
And in that case, the other person is not even in the car. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? I'm sure lots of people who are familiar with your music would be excited to hear about that first experience.
Yeah, as I was learning how to rap, the delivery is one of the things was tricky for me. So the writing came more easily than the delivery. And I had been in a car, a Ford Festiva, which is a really little car, with one of the other members of Doomtree. As I was working on my own raps, he asked to hear one of them, and I was too shy to do it with him in the car. So he left, and he rolled down the window, and he listened through the cracked window in the parking lot of an old country buffet. Yeah.
Why don't you rap like you write? Is the response that you get. And then the next thing that you highlight in the book after that is my rap verses were mostly just lightweight wordplay. My essays, some of which this member of Doomtree had read, were different. They had extended metaphors, literary allusions, subtext, and of course that's what your songs have. Can you remember which songs you wrote midway through this process?
Oh, that's a good question. I think at that point, so I was working on a book, and I was working on the record.
On Shine.
Yeah.
On both of these things, yeah.
And also getting ready for my first show with the Minnesota Orchestra.
Yes. Yeah, which is when we had our first interview.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it might have been the last songs that came into shape for the Minnesota Orchestra. So probably Velodrome and Good Grief.
Excellent. Okay, Velodrome strikes me as having a special relationship to the book. It's kind of the title track because it's the one that refers to chiming. It is the most philosophical insofar as it actually name-checks Aquinas.
Sure.
Do you feel that it has a special relationship with the book? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I think for as much as any of us are preoccupied with the circumstances of our own lives, financial, romantic, health. I mean, you hope that your preoccupation with your particular circumstance, whatever it is, isn't so overwhelming that it blots out an opportunity to have a larger understanding of the world. For me, it was like, okay, well, my particular poker hand is that I had struggled for a long time to fall out of love. And that's just me. Who cares about, other than me, who cares a lot about me? Yeah. What is the bigger picture there? So for me, trying to understand philosophically what it meant, what is compulsion? What is attachment? What is love? What is romance? Led me to questions about can you fall out of love? Is that a choice actually that you can make? Or is some of that a predetermined response? Is that when I hit your knee with the little rubber mallet, you don't decide to kick, you're built to kick, So how much of me is built to kick, and how much can I choose?
And speaking of knees and of choice, you do some research before meeting up with Maxie, who I enjoyed talking about in our previous interview. We have all kinds of opportunities to talk about Maxwell more today. But before meeting up with him and enjoying a conversation about one thing with him, you'd done some research on sexual attraction and certain dance moves determine sexual attraction. So
that's true. So some scientists, in an effort to figure out like how does dancing work in our reproductive universe, outfitted people with motion sensors, measured all their moves, and then essentially animated little avatars and asked other people to watch those avatars dance. So in that way, they're trying to isolate the dance alone. You're not going, oh, she's got cool pants.
Which are the sexiest avatars?
Right.
Yeah.
So the avatars, so the avatars are uniform. The only thing that distinguishes them is dancing. And it was
the knee movements
of the dudes.
Yeah.
As evaluated by heterosexual women, like dudes who really worked out their right knees were rated in a significant way more sexually appealing.
Yeah, which you say in the book makes sense if you think about like the dude at the rock concert. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Who's always wearing Chuck Taylors and moving only his right knee, hands in pockets. Yeah.
And this does relate right back to Velodrome, because as you and your brother Maxwell are talking about this, you highlight in the book that neither of you have really bought very much into the idea of free will. You're very cognizant of how much we're determined by our circumstances, and you refer to free will as almost like the ghosts that we plug into the machine to explain that which we can't otherwise understand. So that's the point at which Velodrome picks up. I don't believe my will's quite free. I'm half machine, at least half steam. Aquinas calling me. Even I don't understand the Aquinas reference. What is the Aquinas reference?
So there is a kind of an esoteric theological discussion that supposedly used to occupy a lot of great minds in debate.
Yeah.
And it was how many angels can stand on the head of a pin.
It's an important issue.
Right, yeah. Tax policy, nah. Cultural gender norms, nah. Angels and pins. And and I remember, so essentially they're asking like, where does the spiritual world engage with the corporeal,
which relates to perhaps the body and the mind.
But my answer, I remember years later, was I'm not religious, but as I was trying to wear stiletto heels, which are very difficult, was like, I can't even get steady on 2 pins. It's how many pins does each angel need is the question, not how many angels can get on pins.
That's the elaboration in the song.
That's the punchline.
So you are not religious. Your mother is.
She is.
And your grandmother, I think on your father's side, there was.
Correct.
And of course the final song on Chime relates to that. And also, I think very importantly, relates to some major themes in the book. So there's one point in the book where you go and see an opera. Is that in New York? Before you live there?
A performance in New York, yes.
Yeah, of the Scottish play. Macbeth. I'll get back to the final song on the record in a moment, which will relate to this. But what is the nature of the play that you saw, the performance that you saw in this hotel?
Sure. So I saw a performance called Sleep No More, which might be familiar to some viewers, and it's a very creative restaging of Macbeth with really athletic dancers in a hotel that's been repurposed for the occasion and is designed down to the square centimeter. The drawer that you open has been filled with objects that relate to it. But the tricky thing is there's no stage. So you just run around following whichever character you might be inclined to trail.
No scene breaks.
Yeah, correct. Action everywhere.
Yeah.
So you couldn't possibly see the whole thing. You just have to run around and follow your curiosity as you go.
And at one moment, you find yourself following 2 dudes who are fighting, and you're thinking, who are these people?
Right.
And you highlight, like in the original play, maybe they're not there at the beginning. And then this leads you to reflect, as is your wont, more philosophically. Life is like that. Like, we are in a drama. I'm a character in Dessa's drama right now.
And I'm a character in
And you're a character in my drama. And Tyler is a character in our dramas too.
Right. And all 3 of us passing through the viewer's drama.
Yeah, but maybe Tyler, who is off stage in this particular scene, is the main character in the most interesting drama. We have no way of knowing this.
Right.
And those guys who are fighting, who you're following, you kind of feel sorry for them because they don't get to be the main characters in their drama.
Right.
What further philosophical reflections did that lead you to have about identity, kind of identity formation, and character?
I mean, in some way, it's a question that I think is easily prompted by doing a performance job, which is what I do, right? So at the beginning of 2018, I was asked to sing the national anthem.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's a really hard song to sing. So I said, oh, that's a really hard song to sing, but I'm super grateful to be asked. What an honor. So I went and I did it. Okay, there was an eagle at this thing. And what's supposed to happen is when I sing the highest note, this eagle like flies over the stadium, and then he's supposed to land on the raised forearm of his trainer. But he got confused while he was circling, and instead he landed on the Mariners pitcher in Paxton in the outfield. And this, I mean, the eagle is as big as a mini fridge. It's a big deal to have it land on you. And then ESPN picked up on that story because it's funny, right?
It is quite funny.
There's a little video, and watching online, I realized, like, it flashes to me singing for a second, like, in all likelihood, that was my moment. Like, that is the most I have ever been seen in my life.
Yes.
ESPN calls, they want a story. You're the woman who's singing the national, right?
Yeah. Because
I'm not a national anthem singer, right? It's like, you don't get to decide definitively the story of you that is most widely told. Right? So I laughed as I'm watching. It's like, oh, really? 3 million impressions overnight? Well, I peaked. Go home, start a new job. Like, that has nothing to do with my life. But that's...
Thanks for being a cameo in the Confused Eagle story.
Right. I'm Paxton and the Eagle in their big play. I am the soundtrack,
And so. That eagle, contra Mr. Wonder, is not the apex of evolution. According to
He's got some room to evolve. Yeah.
According to Dessa's father, not humans, but birds are the apex of evolution.
Right.
We were talking before about birds in our previous interview and how prevalent birds are in Doomtree songs in general. There's like from Sims's Bad Flying Bird to crows and everything. It struck me as particularly interesting, your father's attitude about birds and the fact that when he flies in his glider, it's like being a bird. It's not like being
a passenger in a jetliner.
Yes, you're not like riding a bus with wings, he says. It also feels like playing a violin. What does it feel like to fly this glider? It feels like a violin. That just struck me as a really interesting coming together of the bird focus music.
Yeah.
And the idea of soaring, which I think can also be like a metaphor for these moments, perhaps. We have the chime and we're well calibrated, these moments of soaring. I just thought, wow, everything kind of comes together there.
Good job, Dad.
Yeah, I like your dad. I liked Maxie before, and now I like the whole family.
Score.
So yeah, we find ourselves thinking about how arbitrary the development of our character is, how scarily arbitrary, which again kind of comes up in the conversation where Maxie is talking about hockey and how chaotic as a game it is. This chance plays such a large role. I think chance plays such a large role in our life as well that could lead us to not be the central character or to end up being a different character than we would otherwise ideally like to be. And a recurring focus in the book seems to be on trying to grasp what the important choices need to be to minimize the role of chance and to maximize the role of will and self-determination. And I feel that in this final track we get a very similar picture of your dad that we do in the book. Dad is at the wheel, staying tough. He's always at his best when the blade's right up against his neck.
When you really need him, he'll come through.
Yeah.
He might forget a birthday, but he won't forget a funeral.
Yes, and speaking of which, of course, what's being described in that verse is travelling to the funeral.
Right,
yes.
of his mother.
Yeah, of his mother. You reflect on how different you and your grandmother are, but you also reflect on how that's due to circumstances, because you had the same set of questions, and you're both very deliberative, perhaps. You hypothesize that you could exchange entire lives if you had each other's circumstances, given the same questions. So how does that show up in both of these works, in Chime and in My Own Devices? There is this focus on the importance of making choices. At the end of Say When, you're highlighting that you don't bend, which makes me think of like Fighting Fish and the fact that you have a skeleton key for everything. But then at the same time, there is this recognition that we are determined by our circumstances.
Yeah.
How important a focus is that in both the book and in Chime?
I think probably it's just important in my worldview, and so it ends up finding its expression in the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
I think that we flatter ourselves sometimes when we make estimates about the potency of our agency, meaning how much do I really control my life? And I think the answer is medium at best, but we treat it as if we are really at the helm. So like with my grandmother, the point I had hoped to express in that song was we've had these like crazily different lives, but I don't know that we were pretty fundamentally similar women. The enormous difference in our biography, I think, can be attributable to circumstance. She had a cool voice.
And your mother also has
savvy.
a very cool voice on the other side of the family.
She does, yeah. Yeah, my mom could outsing most people I know or have known, myself enthusiastically included.
Yeah, you claim that in the book.
Yeah. But so I think acknowledging how much environment shapes us, and I don't mean just like you're American or I'm American or you're British or wherever you're from. I mean like the little things.
Sure.
Too. Like I know someone who received chocolates. My ex-stepmom, Linda, she received chocolates as a gift, truffles. Well, she can't throw the truffles away because they're a gift. But she was slight and didn't, you can't eat an entire tray of truffles and stay healthy, but that's what she wanted to do. So she sprayed them with hairspray. So she could still have them out and be socially polite, but she wouldn't eat them. She's limiting the choices that her future self can make by changing the environment.
Yeah, there we go.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so even when you think about like rap music, this idea like, oh, I just listen to it, but I don't listen to the words. Like, yeah, you do.
The words affect you.
They do, in the same way that I cannot decide like, oh, this potato chip, I mean, I'm eating it, but I'm not consuming the calories. Like what you expose your brain to, whether or not it shapes your conscious thoughts, shapes the way that you perceive the world.
What you expose your brain to, and in general, but then in this specific case, there's a whole different meaning to what you expose your brain to.
Sure, yeah.
And
you mean neurofeedback?
Yes,
like,
neurofeedback. Yeah, how you change your brain. You can change the circumstances that the brain has to process.
Sure.
But there is some scope
for
changing the brain as well.